Okay, hello and welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Network webinar series. Today we are joined by Norbert Majerus, who is a Shingo award-winning author. And today Norbert will be giving a presentation on the topic of innovation in uncertain times. But just before we move on to that, just a bit about who we are. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Enterprise Excellence Network is an arena for senior lean leaders founded by Professor Peter Hines, and the network includes benchmarking events and case study examples from award-winning host sites. But you will receive an email from myself which has some more information on how to find out more about the network. So today, after the presentation by Norbert, there will be a 30-minute Q&A session. So please feel free to ask these in the questions tab on your control panel. And these will be given to Norbert from Peter. Okay, so I'll now hand over to Professor Peter Hines. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emma, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be listening to us today. It's my pleasure to have Norbert with us today. And those of you who were with us on our last webinar, we had Jim Lippens from Belgium. So we're having a tour of the Benelux countries, Norbert coming originally from Luxembourg. And Norbert and I bump into each other usually about once a year at the Shingo conference, although we haven't done that for this last year, unfortunately, for obvious reasons. And so I'm very pleased to welcome him. And after many years working in Goodyear and taking them through Shingo Prize recognition and writing his innovation book, which also got Shingo recognition as well, I think we're in for a fascinating hour with Norbert. So with that, I'll hand over and let's tell us more about innovation in uncertain times.
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Emma, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for joining us here today. I love these opportunities. I learned a lot about lean, about innovation in my career, and I'm retired now, and I'm happy to get opportunities to share it, to share what I learned, to give other people ideas, help other people learn from mistakes that we made or insights that we came up with. So the scope here, very quickly, I talk about lean and innovation, but this is not about R&D. Not only about R&D. I did most of my work in an innovation center, yes. But what I talk about today applies to services, hospitals, government, process improvement, wherever innovation could be needed or could be used. So we'll start very general here and talk about uncertainty, about risk. So we're starting a new project here, and I have a timeline. This could be days, weeks, months, years, whatever. So we start at a certain risk. And the purpose of any R&D work or development work or whatever you name it is to reduce that risk. It's to reduce that risk, and as we reduce that risk, we invest and we spend money, and we develop something that eventually we launch when the risk is coming down to zero. And this is what it normally, what it should be, but this is what it is in reality. Actually, we don't really know the risk very well. As soon as we start working on it, okay, we find out this doesn't work, or we should have done this, and so on. So even sometimes the risk immediately goes up. But over the years or times or months or whatever, we still succeed to reduce it. But unfortunately, the launch is coming up on us, and very, very often the risk is not all the way zero when we launch it, and we fix a lot of problems after the launch. And if you ever bought a new car, I think you know what I'm talking about. So there is another risk that most people do not account for, and I call it the economic risk. And I have here about 20 years of economic risk plotted. You know what happened in 2020, and I don't even know that anybody knows where this is going to end, to be quite honest. I hope we got to the turning point, but I don't know where that's. This risk in the 2010, that was the economic crisis. These were two things that happened to me at Goodyear. This was a strike by the union, and this was a crisis at Goodyear where about 20% of all the folks in the offices had got laid off, and nobody could foresee any of these. They just happened. And what did we do? And well, we couldn't foresee them, so we had to react to them quickly. And that's really what it's all about right now. Nobody could foresee the pandemic. Nobody knows where it's going. The people who are in the driver's seat are the ones who are able to react quickly. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to put these two curves on top of each other now, because that's really the risk that we manage when we develop new products or services. And I do not even know how to add these. They are on a different scale to start with, and I would not even know how to add them. The only thing that I know, it's really roller coaster right now, and that's the best way. That's the best way to describe it. So here is a typical development process and a typical innovation process for again, product, services, even continuous improvement, whatever. You start with a creation. You start with an idea. You start exploring options. Okay, then you develop it, whatever, the service, the product, and it's mostly technology, new knowledge, I should call it, and then you put it in a product. That's actually the best way to do it. Most people start with the product, and then they end up with a little improvement to the product. The people who are good at this start out here with a vast amount of new ideas, a big comprehensive technology, and then only at the last step they let it go into a product. But anyway, two leading principles here. You don't know what this is going to be about until you start developing it. You have no idea about the product until you start working on it, or the service, or whatever. In the first couple of months, that's when you really learn what it's all about. And this is also for project management, by the way. And then the next thing is all things will change every day. So keep these two things in mind. You have to start working on it and be ready to see things change every day and be able to adapt. So that's what we're going to talk about here in the next 20 minutes. And then I'm going to talk about how you can implement that and bring the people along in buying into this. So the first one is very easy. Explore a vast space. Don't just look at a product and improve the product. Look at the total space, all the options, all possibilities, everything that is out there that you could consider. The more options you consider, the more successful you will be. Okay, the next one, we're moving to an agile methodology for software development. I don't know all the details, but I think one of you has to be designated the Scrum bag. Does that sound right? Well, it's better than I thought. Obviously, we're talking about Scrum and Agile now. So the idea about Scrum and Agile is to experiment in small steps. And I added to it to also allocate the money in the same agile manner. Not allocate the money for a 3-year project, but allocate the money for a 2-week project. You all heard about the idea Scrum, sprints, Agile. It's being marketed under many different names. The idea is that you have a potentially shippable product after every cycle. Cycles can be a day, a week, a month. I've rarely seen them go over a month, and you put sticky notes on a board and you move them along as you make progress. You work into small steps. Very important, cross-functionally, of course, and you retain the flexibility. After every little cycle, you see where you're at. Are we going in the right direction? Do we have anything that we can sell already? And so on and so on. You don't wait 2 years to show your results. You show them every week or every month. You show them to your sponsors, to your customers. And the basic idea is you build something, you test it, you learn, and you go through this cycle as fast as you can and as often as you have to. As I said, the idea is very well known, Agile, Scrum, and so on. And I have seen a lot of people taking their Gantt chart, their Waterfall project plan here, and then they, instead of doing them in big chunks, they do them in little pieces. And that takes advantage of one of the Agile methodologies. After every one of these little steps, you can rethink, you can reorganize, you can reset. So you get some advantage. And I've seen one major global company, they do this, and they even put stage gate on top of it. And at least when they talked about it 3 years ago, they said it seems to work. And I'm sure it does. But here, and another name for something, scaled agile, that's when you take these little steps and you roll them up to a whole enterprise management system. I've seen it being done. I've seen it work. But this slide here, I cut off 2/3, so it's a very, very complex system. Here's my problem, the only problem that I see with it. What if I find out right here that it doesn't work, and now I wasted all this time? And that's really the part that always bothered me about it. And I tell you why. It's not managing the risk correctly. This is how I like to manage my risk. I like to get the risk down to 0 as fast and as efficiently as possible. And that does not happen if I work in the waterfall methodology. So my question is, how can I know after the first week if it's worth continuing my project? And here's my experience. Here's what I learned. In the 70s, this was one of my first projects at Goodyear. This was late 70s. Goodyear had invented a transparent tire. It was a tire made out of plastic. And we made it in all colors and shapes and sizes. And the chairman here, he put them on his car. We put lights in them, and he drove through Market Street in Akron, Ohio, and all the newspapers were there. And the next day, his picture was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The biggest revolution in tires ever. And we made tires by the thousands. We had molds and machines and anything, colors, you name it. And then a few years later, after we had spent millions of dollars on this project, somebody asked the question, well, can we sell this thing? And, oh yeah, of course. We all assumed that the tire would pass the government test. And guess what? It blew up. And that question was not resolved until this day. So here I'm saying, why did we not ask that question first? And that's what I mean. For me, this is about asking the most critical question first, answering it, the next most critical question, answering it, especially if you are in times like we are today, where you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. 40 years later, a new tire, it has recycled material in it. The recycled material has been there for a while, but it has never been good for the performance, and now we finally had something and we figured out how to maintain the performance. The only problem, it was more expensive. We done lab tests, and the normal procedure would have been, now develop the tire, we spend a year to develop the tire, we give it to marketing, they try to sell it. But we had learned. What was the most critical question here? It was, will people pay more money for a tire with recycled material? And what we did is took some tires, put the name on the sidewall. It didn't take much, could do that in a couple of days, printed some stuff, and it went out to the Goodyear stores. And it was actually the engineers, they tried to sell this tire. And guess what? Nobody bought one. So this project, after a couple of weeks of work to make this setup, we had learned that at this time we cannot sell this product. The project isn't dead. Maybe maybe things will change, and then we started back up again. But we saved millions of dollars and engineering resources by answering the most critical question first. This is a project that I worked with at a high school in Ohio. It was called Fun in Engineering, and I had a group of students, nerds. They weren't interested in band or sports, and they loved to tinker with robots, and we made little projects and participated in competition, local competition. And the headmaster came and said, I want to put a windmill on the school, and because I want to teach the kids and the city about renewable energy. And the school was on the top of a hill, perfect location. And he asked if our little team of students could take on a project like this. And I said, yeah, why not? Let's try it. But we didn't get very far. We stopped the project after a few weeks. And here's why. Most critical question. They had just repopulated a bird. It was called the peregrine falcon in the city, with big fanfare all over the newspapers. And those birds fly into these windmills and they get killed. And we would never have gotten any permit for any of this because of that of those new inhabitants of the city. So we made a nice presentation to the school board and froze the project. When this happens, you can pivot, go another direction. You can stay the course or you can freeze it. I showed you several projects here that ended up frozen. The next idea is good enough. And I could talk about Zeppos, but I rather talk about this case. This is Akron Children's Hospital, a hospital with really a lean mindset. And they were building a new hospital. And they looked at the drawings of the architect, they didn't like them, and they threw them away, and they rented a warehouse, and they built the hospital with cardboard. And they brought beds out here. They brought the doctors, the nurses, even parents, all kind of people. They looked at flow, they looked at capacity, and all kind of things. At the end, they saved about 60 million on the investment. And by the way, to show you, give you an idea, the hospital was planned for 10 procedure rooms, and they ended up building it with 2. All what they learned with this minimum investment, this flexible way of doing their build, test, learn cycle. And of course, don't box yourself in. Don't make any decisions that limit you. And then one of the other very, very big ones, you have to be able to work fast. When things change, it's the fastest one that will take advantage of it. What do you call it? The first bird out in the morning gets the worm. And a good example, the N95 mask. Sure you know what this is. And 3M makes them. And when the pandemic hit, they did not worry too much about how much money this will cost to at capacity, because they knew they could make a fortune on it. They just jumped in, and whatever it took, they did. And I like to show this example. In 2009, when the fuel prices had skyrocketed, at Goodyear, we developed the fuel economy tire. It took us 6 months to develop it, and it was on the market. We had no competition for a year and a half. No competition. 2 years later, of course, everybody had the same tire, the fuel prices had come down, and Goodyear discontinued the tire. However, during those 2 years, man, Goodyear made an absolute fortune on this. So it really pays off to be fast. And there are many ways to do this in a lean environment. Reuse what you already know. Don't reinvent everything. Collaborate from the beginning. Don't design anything and then let manufacturing figure out if they can make it. Flow, very big one. All the processes have to be designed for flow, just as it's in manufacturing. Visual management, see a deviation from the standard immediately and fix it. Multitasking, Little's law, single piece flow works very, very well in an R&D environment. Late start everything as late as possible. The later you start, the more you know about it. And then, of course, the critical path is all that matters. That's where no need to get faster if it's not on the critical path. And theory of constraint, even though it's not a popular lean concept, it works extremely well here. Just to give you an idea about how to do it, and we can become 2, 3, 4 times faster. And if you didn't get any of this, I'd like to show this example, the baton at a relay race. All that matters is that the baton gets over the finish line. Nobody would think about that a runner comes in and the next runner isn't there, or nobody would think about putting the baton down during the race. Well, why do we stop projects? Why are we not ready to take the project on when it's our turn? It's hard to. This metaphor for me is a good one, because in an office you do this all the time. You never watch the baton, you never watch the project, you never watch the what makes money for you at the end. You just watch the people and see if they work hard enough. Well, that's something that the focus has to change. Okay, now that gets me to young Ramon here. Ramon is living somewhere in Latin America, and he wants to be a world-class soccer player and football player for the English folks here. And he works hard at it, and he develops agility and speed. And he is a very, very talented young man, and he will excel in his sport. And while Ramon grows up, let me just very quickly get back to our product or process or service process here. Of course, when I'm in the creation phase, that's where I manage the risk. I have to be agile, flexible, fast. But when it comes to the product at the end, well, all the risk should be down to 0, because now I spent the big money, and but I still have to be fast. And in between the technology, many other lean principles like set-based, concurrent engineering, and many more are in our toolbox there. I just wanted to show you that there is more than just the creation part, because sometimes I confuse people if I just talk about this front phase, how to manage this very high risk. There are 2 steps that follow that. But in the meantime, Ramon has grown up, and he plays for one of the top teams in the world, and he has joined the Champions League. And actually today Ramon plays in the let's say the final of the Champions League. We will not name the teams, but he is out there, and it's at the end of the first half. Okay, and what this is all about now is not the speed of the runners anymore, but it's the speed of the decisions. And here's Ramon. He just intercepted the ball on the 18, and here's what he does. Captain, what should I do? Captain says, I can't say, this is too much for me. Ask the coach. Hey, coach, what should I do? Well, this is tough. Let me call the president. I get back to you. 5 minutes later, coach calls Ramon and says, "Hey, Ramon, he will call back. He's in a meeting." Well, that's not how it happens. Even though in the office it happens like that every day. This is what happens. Ramon sees his teammate dash off out to the corner flags. This opens a space. Ramon puts the ball in there. Behind him is one of his other teammates already at full speed and still on side. Sprints after the ball, shoots on goal. The goalie saves it, but Ramon ran after his teammate there as a backup, and he recovers the ball and puts it in the net. So how does that happen? Players are not born like that. They need to learn it. And we need to learn the same agility, speed, and everything in a company. It's empowerment and trust. The coach does not need to tell Ramon. Ramon is empowered to do it. And the coach trusts him. The coach encouraged Ramon and all his teammates to take responsibility, but to also take risk. Foster entrepreneurship. They have to come up with those decisions on their own. They do it with humility. It's not about Ramon shining here. It's about the ball was in the net and they are up a goal going into the break. It's collaboration. They help each other. It's not about I'm going to be the best player here. It's about how can we win as a team. It's influence, it's respect, it's motivation, and it's recognition. Ramon gets recognized even if he does not succeed, if he has the right idea and it does not lead to a goal. But it was the right idea. The coach will compliment him on it. The coach will tell him he did a good job. So how do we take this football or soccer now to the corporation? Well, it starts with clarity around the vision. The vision on the football field is very clear. We score more goals than the other guys. But in a company, it's not at all. Very often, it's hidden, it's secret because we don't want to tell competition. You build on your strengths, close the gaps, and then the football team. If you're good at something, no need to practice it, but you practice on what you're not good at. You engage the people in the change. The coach certainly asks the team sometimes, how do you think we should do this? Help everybody. Everybody helps everybody else to be successful. Change includes all leadership levels. If you want to get better, it's not good enough if leadership says, hey, we need to change, we need to get better. Leadership has to say, how can we get better? What do we have to do? How can we help the rest of the organization to get better? Practice, set the example. It's all about responsibility, trust, and accountability. Hold people responsible, but trust them to do the right thing, but hold them accountable. But the big one, of course, for me is respect. Leadership has to respect everybody in the company. People have to respect each other. And I want to show you just the last one here. Experiment and learn. You've seen it with the product before, and I'm going to promote the same learning cycle here when we want to get better. To see, try, and learn. And you encourage the experiment. This is Menlo innovation, by the way, and I learned this from Richard Sheridan, the owner. You allow the people to experiment. That's where it starts. Let them take a risk, but with responsibility. It's okay to fail. If somebody tries something in the right mind and fails, well, that is okay. Thank for success and for the initiative. Even if it doesn't work, thank the people for taking the initiative. It will work one of these days. So for me, that is a key piece of becoming an organization as agile and as fast as you've seen the team with the soccer or football team with young Ramon. So what's the role of a leader in a lean organization? It's to create the environment, the culture, remove obstacles, set directions, and set the example. The second one, help the people be successful. And the third is to develop other leaders. These are not being taught in most of the business schools today, unfortunately. They work very, very, very well. People who have done a successful lean transformation know how to do this. They have done them. I personally had to learn about them, how to do them when I led a big transformation at Goodyear. But I am here to tell you they do work. They work well. They work well in every environment, and they especially work well in an environment as difficult and as unpredictable as we are in today. So understand, manage the uncertainty, work agile along the risk scale, not just work agile, but along the risk scale. Develop the right processes for innovation. Innovation does need a process, and then build the culture based on respect and engagement. So here's my contact information. I will leave that up there for a while. I hope you have questions for me now. This is an interesting subject, a subject that a lot of people are wrestling with at the moment, a lot of companies. But if you don't get your answer today, please don't hesitate to email me or call me or whatever. I promise I will answer. So thanks again for letting me share my thoughts here, and I will turn it over back to Peter for some questions.
Thank you very much, Norbert. Very good, very interesting. So there's a comment here we've got just come in, but in the meantime, while I'm looking at this, and I have a question I'd like to ask Norbert in a minute, if you want to type into the question tab on the box on the right-hand side, then we can pose the questions to Norbert. So the comment that comes in is from Mathili, whose comment says, really appreciate that you're specifically calling out examples when things didn't work and why the action was taken. So I think that's a comment. So
there was not, when we started this initiative at Goodyear, there was in 2006, there was not a lot available. There was not a lot published on the subject, and the only thing we had was try things. And I was accused by my president at one time. He said, all you do is throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And I answered it by, well, as long as I throw enough, something will eventually stick. And it's not very scientific, but unfortunately, that's how it's often done. And you learn from your mistakes. And, but I also showed a few things that worked.
Yeah, very good. So, I mean, I think I could sort of summarize that there was a lot of the agile approach and the small sprints rather than the sort of waterfall approach. How did you did you find, you know, some of the traditional lean tools like QFD or set-based concurrent engineering? Did that fit into your approach?
Oh, absolutely. The middle part of this whole process, when you develop the technology, that's all about knowledge. What you do there, it's not this traditional research anymore, where you have the resources to work like I was taught when I was in college. By the way, that you still use the same thinking, but when you have somebody, a private company paying for it, they want the results much faster, and they want to be much more focused. So you, first of all, you focus only on your knowledge gaps. What you already have, you don't reinvent. You focus on your knowledge gaps. And that's where set-based concurrent fits in very, very, very well. And I have used it, and I am currently writing about it. It works very well in that phase. You may find it useful in the risk phase, but I have found that the agile Scrum methodology is something that that's much better to very quickly and very efficiently reduce very high risk. But then when you get to the set base, it has all the parameters of the full design space, the concurrent work, where you see the interactions and so on and so on. It's a very, very good methodology. I prefer it in that phase, but that doesn't mean that it could be used in other phases too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. We have a question from William here who says, should a lean transformation be done as a big bang or incrementally?
That is a very interesting question, and it's the first time I get a question like that, as a big bang or incrementally. It often starts as a big bang. It often starts with a burning platform. It's often started the next day after the big layoff or whatever, or after you publish your terrible results. So you have a big bang very often when it starts. In fact, Jim Womack says if you don't have the big bang, you may want to create it. In fact, at Goodyear, we had the big bang. We had a strike, and the innovation center was pretty much, and the plant shut down for about 6 months. So we had the big bang. But the big bang is just there to get everybody engaged. You can use it for that. But then I think you have to have a very, very, very good plan. And that is, a lot of people just jump in and do something small here and there and there. And when the leadership asks after some time, well, do you have any results? Well, then people have to go and look for the results, and often don't find much that appeals to the leadership. So I think you need a plan, and also in that plan, you have to think about what results can I show? What results can I show quickly to keep my leadership and all my colleagues and everybody engaged in this? And then part of your plan should also be, where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? A lot of people who jump in, they want to copy Toyota. That works in some cases, by the way. But in some cases, people will realize they are not Toyota, and they don't have the same problems than Toyota had. And and they unfortunately throw away a lot of good things. And so focus on your strengths, find your opportunity, find the weaknesses, find the opportunities, find the threats, and that's where you focus it. And while you do it, you do two things at the same time. You do the processes and the people part at the same time. Don't do what I did at Goodyear, just focus on the processes. I learned very quickly that was not the good way. You do the processes and engaging the people at the same time. And it's a great opportunity to do it when you do it right away, when you do it as you start. So, but very important question, and thanks for that question. That's very important.
So I have another thought. I have to explain a little bit of background. So the question is around, you know, how should we target results or measure success? Because I did quite a lot of work in the food industry with some of the UK retailers like Tesco and Asda, which Asda is the Walmart in the UK. And the early work that we did in the late 90s was very much about time to market and, you know, the target of reducing the time to market by 2/3 was what we got to with Tesco, which was obviously great. And then when we moved on and worked with Asda, we realized that most of the literature on product development, as you said, was very technically orientated. It was very much about how do you improve the process, you know, how do you reduce time, how do you get stage gates to work well, and you know, these types of things. But very little of it was around the commercial success. So some of your examples with the tires, and so we ended up with brilliantly successful product development with products that really weren't very successful. So with the ASDA, which came in the early 2000s, we said, well, yes, you need the process success, but also you need the sales commercial success. So in that case, the key metric we adopted was what percentage of products being produced were on the shelf in the second quarter, because then they hadn't been delisted. So it was sort of like a commercial. So what's your sort of view on how do you measure success?
Yeah, very good. But that is a relatively long question there, and there are two aspects that I heard in them. How to measure success? You need to have some quick successes as you work through a major transformation. And trust me, only complete transformations where everybody is engaged and where you hit everybody in the company are the ones that are going to be successful and where you're going to get real big numbers. So you need to lay out what is really important for us. And to give you an example, at Goodyear, it takes several years to see the bottom line change. Yes, but we knew that if we would get faster and more on time, more predictable, that's what would make a huge big difference. So we actually started measuring on-time delivery, and it was terrible at the beginning. Launching on time and on target, it was less than 10% at the beginning or 20%, but we made progress every couple of months. And it was visual progress, and marketing said, hey, we have the product. We will make money on this thing now. So, and then a year or two later, it became visible. But the idea is that you find those pieces where everybody will agree. If those change, we will meet our targets. And defining those was one of the key points. But I heard one thing from you, Peter. You mentioned 3 or 4 things, and in this case you couldn't sell it, and in that case we can't make it, and in that case something else will happen. That is very, very difficult with innovation, and that's where this process comes in. Like, what's the most critical question? The most critical question could be, will anybody buy this thing? The most critical question could be, can we make it efficiently? It could be it could be I know, for example, working with medical pharmaceutical suppliers, very often the most critical question is, hey, this will cost a fortune to get approval for this. This is probably not going to be worth it. Believe it or not, this doesn't sound good in these times. Think about what would have been the most critical question to be asked with this vaccine now. For example, everybody was totally focused on manufacturing it. Of course, getting the approval. Everybody was focused on that. Everybody was totally focused on producing it. And by the way, the vaccine was already available in December 2019, believe it or not. They already knew at that time how to make it. But one critical question was totally overlooked. How can we get it out to these millions and millions of people out there? 10% or 20% of the vaccines have been used so far. And that is where I challenge product developers or service developers to constantly find that most critical question and make sure you work from that most critical question your way down. If somebody had asked that question 6 months ago, we would have a registration system today. There would be, people would be listed from the first one to the 50 millionth one, how they fall in line, and there would be a way to contact them and tell them when their appointment is, and if they don't take it, the next one will move up in line. But it is finding those critical questions. And in the technology part, we were always focused on the critical question is only the technology. And that is so far from the truth. The critical question is most of the time not the technology. It's the market, it's the approval process, it's the manufacturing, you name it. And I think I want people to spend more time on that part before they jump into investing millions of dollars into machines and research.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay,
it was
so
a
we have
long
another question.
answer, Peter.
Yeah, no, that's all right. We have another question from Mathili here. So it's sort of linked to the last one, but leadership gets impatient to see improvement in outcome metrics, which takes time, even though process metrics are moving in the right direction. Your suggestions to address this concern?
Yes, actually very easy, because I've been there many times. I asked the leader, what do you want to see in the next 3 months? What do you want to see in the next 6 months? And especially if a leader tells me this whole thing is not going to work, we did this before, you all heard that. Then I asked that leader, what would it take for me to do to show you that it can be, that we can make it work? Those are ways to engage the leader. Okay, and if the leader tells me here, this is, most leaders cannot tell you at that time. They cannot even tell you what they want to see. Then it's a matter of helping the leader to come up with what they want to see. But if a leader tells me, for example, I want to see a 50% improvement in the speed to market, and I want to see first indicators after 3 months, then I ask that leader, what kind of indicators are we talking about? And we agree on an indicator. And I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to try to use that indicator and show to you after 3 months that we're on the right track and we can make this work. And that is very important, to keep that conversation open. Now, I'm already on that leader schedule 3 months from now, because I know he will accept my meeting, and we will sit down and I will show him that data. And I'm going to do my very, very best, or even because I committed to it. I'm accountable to deliver. If I said I'm going to prove to you that we are 30% faster after 3 months, then I will work towards that. So to me, it's those conversations that have to happen with leadership that keeps the leadership engaged.
I have something to add on this one, that you know, one of the pieces of work I've done recently, again, it's in the food sector, is looking at this whole measurement area of bringing new products to market, or R&D, etc. And so where we got to is we started to think of metrics in 3 types. So we thought of output measures, which could be time to market or commercial success, something like that. And then we thought of lead measures. So if we were trying to say reduce time to market, what would be a lead measure? So a lead measure might be something like, you know, what percentage of time gates were hit on time, or something like that, for example. And then even further upstream, which would be very fitting in with the sort of Shingo approach that Norbert and I are quite keen on, we're saying, well, what behaviors would we need to have in place so that we actually hit the stage gauge, which might be behaviors around teamwork or cross-functionality or punctuality, turning up to meetings, etc., etc. And hence, if you could get that sort of lead, lag, and behaviors and involve your boss in those conversations, it might be a good way to sort of see that pipeline working. And over time, they could get some confidence that the lead measures and then the behaviors even further leading actually did flow through. So that might be one good one to think about. I don't know, Norbert, do you want to comment on that thought? Does that make sense?
You said something very important, very interesting there, that you have also, you measure behaviors. And I am a strong believer that starts from the very beginning. You need to change the behaviors as you change everything else. And it's much harder to change the behaviors, by the way, than other things. So, but I want to use the transformation itself to get the people engaged, and while they get engaged in transformation, that is a great opportunity for them to learn and to change behavior. So metrics around behaviors are very difficult to find. The best thing is observation. That's my opinion, especially at the beginning. Observing less of and observing more of. But you also said that lead metric, but that is really critical to have a lead metric. You don't just you tune on your soccer game, your football game, and you don't see a score. Well, that would be a boring afternoon if you have to wait to the end of the game to see what happened. And so you need that constant feedback in a metric, and that's why you like those leading metrics, those that early on tell you what the end result will be. And that's what I would engage the impatient leader in, to come up with a leading metric that you can come back from time to time and show your progress by means of that leading metric. Of course, I should have said that when I talked about it the first time. Thanks for bringing that up, Peter.
So, I mean, if you take the football analogy, you could say, obviously, the output metric is whether you score goals or let them in. That could be the result, if you like. A lead metric could be possession, or time in the opposition half, or something, or number of corners, or something like that.
Of course. And
then,
go ahead.
I was just saying, behavior could be one that was used in England recently was actually the running, on the basis that the further players run, the more they're creating space. So their behavior is running a lot, so that they get more position, they get in the other half, so they ultimately score more goals. So that would be a simple example of how this could work in a football game. Unfortunately, the guy who talked about this got sacked the week after, Frank Lampard, which is funny because he obviously didn't succeed with the metric. But
well, for example, a people metric that I stumbled on, a behavior metric that I stumbled on recently, and it brought back a lot of memories, is people go home on time happy. And it's something that absolutely we noticed, but never bothered measuring. But when we got the AME award for the Innovation Center at Goodyear, they interviewed a few people, and this young lady said, "Man, that was the biggest thing for her after several weeks of into this transformation. All of a sudden, she was done at 4 o'clock and could go home because she needed to, because she had 3 kids to take care of, and she said, and I was happy too." And very simple things that could be used for that. But you're right with your football analogy. Those are great leading measures. We need to find them, and they are different for every company. But trust me, the leaders know them. And I always like to ask the leader, what do you want to see? Not that I bring a metric and they say, well, that's not what we need to measure. What do you tell me? And we immediately focus on what you tell me then.
Absolutely. So I have another question. So, a lot of what you talked about was sort of, I suppose, agile on balance, although it was sort of, a little bit more than that, perhaps. What is your view? I'm actually personally doing some work on looking at how do you do enterprise excellence in the non-manufacturing office environments, either service companies or manufacturers in the office. And obviously Lean has some sort of shop floor bias towards some of the thinking, and Agile has some sort of, IT or software development. What do you think? How applicable do you think the agile approaches would be into the office environment, non-product development environments?
Well, I think there is a lot of confusion out there on all those things. First of all, we brought manufacturing into innovation. 70% of the innovation process is run like a factory, with Kanban cards, with standard work, and all that good stuff, and cadence and flow and you name it. So nobody should. I argue with people when they say, well, manufacturing doesn't work in the office. That's not true. The key is it doesn't work everywhere in the office. And the same is with Agile. And the people who market Agile, I don't know if they often, they don't often know exactly what the companies are really doing. Because if they knew, I'm sure they would sell it where it belongs. And it can go anywhere, by the way. I just find it extremely efficient in the front part where the risk is very, very, very high. And where you don't have money or you don't want to spend money. There's no need to spend money on a project like I showed you with the plastic tire. That's where I think the Agile works really, really, really well. But it could be used at other places too. And I think manufacturing works really, really well when the big money is spent, when we just execute, and about 70% of R&D is done in a mode where those principles work very, very well. For me, it all comes down to learning the principles first, and then figuring out where do they apply the best for me in my company with my processes. And that's when you will be successful with them. I've seen Agile very successful in many, many applications, but I also see a lot of people give up on it, say this thing doesn't work. Well, if you use it in the right place would be my first question for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at times against us, I think I think that final comment that you made there is, you know, you almost need to think this out for yourself. You need to make something work for your company, your environment that you're working in. And you know, so I think that's something that we really need to think of. Actually, we've got one more thought here. So again, from Philly saying, your thoughts on bringing physician office employees, including physicians, to start on this continuous improvement journey?
I had a real eye-opener about 2 years ago. I was at a clinic. I was at a very frustrating environment in a clinic. It was a kidney clinic where they do dialysis. People come in deadly sick, and progress is very slow and very difficult, and the people in that clinic, there was an enormously high turnover. They had a really hard time to engage the people and so on. And they got a new chairman, and the chairman knew nothing about lean, and he knew nothing about innovation. However, he came from a company that had done pretty much what I call lean innovation. They had, he said, if we do lean and innovation in this kidney clinic, we will improve our turnaround and everything else. I always thought it must be crazy. It had nothing to do with it. But as I said, the gentleman didn't know the details, but he saw it work at another company. And he actually started it, did it right, and it worked really, really well. They just engaged the people around in an innovation program, coming up with ideas and stuff like that. The ideas weren't what mattered. What mattered was that they engaged the people, that they gave the people something else than working with a deadly sick person all day that is grouchy and that just yells at them. Those people had something else. And believe it or not, it worked. It worked well. The success was not in the new processes or in the innovation. The success was in the people engagement, which was their problem. And I give this gentleman a lot of credit. He didn't know the process. He didn't know much about it, but he knew it worked someplace else. And he tried it, got the right people to do it, and they solved their biggest problem. A year later, their turnover was below industry average.
Okay, very good. So, well, I think time's sort of pretty much up for us there. So it just leaves me to thank Norbert very much for his presentation. I enjoyed the conversation and questions as well. So thank you very much for that. And I'll pass on to Emma, who will wind us down for the day.
Yes, thanks, Peter. Thank you very much, Norbert. Just to summarise, you will receive the webinar recording afterwards in a follow-up email, as well as some feedback, which is always useful for us, and also details on how to register for our upcoming webinars will be on that email as well. So we hope to see you again shortly. Thanks very much again, Norbert.
Okay, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.